dulu.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today we are from group 2. We want to explain about psychological mechanism. So the first I want to introduce the member of the second group. The first is NIJMIA NURIL ALIYYAH, second is DITA LESTANI, third is ROZAN IBNU, fourth SHEPTY ISNAENY, yang kelima ada CANDRA BAYU, dan terakhir saya sendiri TEGAL DAHLER. Ya, slide selanjutnya Mas Os. So I will introduction about the psychological mechanism. So the psychological mechanisms that are involved in using language together with the linguistic principle presented in chapter 2. This mechanism provide the basis for an integral understanding of language use. Language processing is a joint product of linguistic principle and psychological mechanism. Jadi di chapter 2 ini kita akan menjabarkan apa sih itu psychological mechanism. So this chapter consists of 3 sections. The first present an overview on the human information processing system. Jadi presentasi pertama nanti melihat proses atau sistem informasi manusia. Kurang lebihnya seperti itu. Nah, yang kedua, the second section applies this concept more directly to language processing and examines a series of issues that arise in the context. Dan yang section terakhir, the final section, ada sketch the development of the processing system and examines the question of which portion of the system may be present at the time that most children are in the native language. Ya, next slide, Mas Os. Oke, jadi kesimpulannya di introduction tadi ada 3. Yang pertama ada the information processing system. Yang kedua ada central issues in language processing, isu sentral di proses bahasa. Yang terakhir ada development of the processing system. Ya, next slide. Okay, the information processing system will be presented by next group member, Mas Rozan. Oh.
The information processing system will be presented by me, Rozan. And this is the information processing system. You have to begin to lose your memory, if only in bits and pieces, to realize that memory is what makes our life. Life without memory is no life at all. Our memory is our coherence, our reason, our feeling, even our action. Without it, we are nothing. Louis Bunuil. Okay, next. The information processing system. There are 3 ways we store memories. So once memory is created, it must be stored no matter how briefly it is. Many experts think there are 3 ways we store memories. First, in the sensory stage, then in short-term memory, and ultimately for some memories in long-term memory. Because there is no need for us to maintain everything in our brain. The different stages of human memory function as a sort of like a filter that helps to protect us from the flood of information that we're confronted in our daily life. So let's talk about the process. The first process is the sensory stage. The creation of a memory begins with its perception. The registration of information during perception occurs in the brief of sensory that usually lasts only a few seconds or a fraction of a second. So information is received through a person's sense, then it comes from the environment around you. So it's your sensory that allows a perception such as a visual pattern, a sound, touch, temperature, pain, or smell for a brief of moment of after the stimulation is over. And then after this, after the first flicker, after you hear the sound or smell something, the sensation is stored in short-term memory. So short-term memory has a very limited capacity. It can hold about 7 items for no more than 20 or 30 seconds at a time. So you may be able to increase this capacity somewhat by using various memory strategies. For example, a 10-digit number such as this number 80058400392 may be too much for you to memorize this. But you need the strategy is you need to divide into a chunk, yeah, separated like a telephone number, like 800, 584, and 0392 may actually stay in your short-term memory long enough for you to dial or the telephone. Likewise, by repeating the number to yourself, you can keep resetting the short-term memory clock. Another example is a tongue twister. Yeah, you hear some tongue twister. You may be really hard to remember it. For example, Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. A pack of pickled peppers. Piper picked. If Peter Pep if Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers, where's the pack of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? Snap, crackle, pop. So it's very hard to remember it. And the next process is long-term memory. The important information is gradually transferred from short-term memory into long-term memory. The more the information is repeated or used, the more likely it is eventually end up in long-term memory or to be retained. That's why studying helps people to perform better on tests. Unlike sensory and short-term memory, which are limited and decay rapidly, long-term memory can store unlimited amounts of information indefinitely. People tend to more easily store material on subjects that they already know something about, since the information has more meaning to them and can be mentally connected to related information that is already stored in their long-term memory. So that's why someone who has an average memory may be able to remember a greater depth of information about one particular subject. Next slide is most people think of long-term memory when they think of memory itself. But most experts believe information must first pass through sensory and short-term memory before it can be stored as long-term memory. So this is the long-term memory is often broken down into 4: episodic memory, semantic memory, autobiographical memory, and implicit memory. The first is semantic memory. The first is episodic memory. I'm sorry. Episodic memory is the memory of everyday events, such as times, location, geography, associated emotion, and other contextual information that can be explicitly stated or conjured. For example, is your 20th birthday party. You will remember who gave the present, yeah, who the person who gave this present, this book or something. You must be remember one of a position of your memory. And then the next is semantic memory. This memory is refers to a portion of long-term memory that process ideas and concepts. They are not drawn from personal experience. So semantic memory includes things that are common knowledge, such as the names of colors, the sounds of letters, the capital of countries, and other basic facts acquired over a lifetime. Yeah, you Maybe you learn about geographic. What is the capital of Thailand? The capital is Bangkok. And after you become 60 years old, you still remember the capital of Thailand is Bangkok. And the next is autobiographical memory. It's a memory system consisting of episodes recollected from an individual life based on combination of episodic, personal experience, and specific object, people, and events experienced at particular time and place. And semantic is like a general knowledge and facts about the word memory. So it's about the events from your life, your important events, your experience, like a traumatic car accident, winning a prize, getting an A on your final test, and first case or all example of this type of memory. And the next is implicit memory, also known as a procedural memory or muscle memory. Is sometimes referred to an unconscious memory or automatic memory. Implicit memory uses past experience to remember things without thinking about them. The performance of implicit memory is enable previous experience, no matter how long ago those experience occurs. So you can driving a car, but you don't need to remember how to driving a car, how to drive a car, because you have skill. Yeah, so it's impossible to forget how to drive a car. And then the next is relevance for language process will be presented by SHEPTY.
Okay, thank you. Relevant for language processing. The processing function of working memory is used to organize the words into the constituent. Long-term memory plays several roles. Semantic memory contains information on the speech, sounds, and words that we retrieve during pattern recognition, also building up an episodic memory representation of the ongoing discourse. That is, once we complete the processing of a given sentence, we might extract the gist of it and store that in episodic memory. We return to the concept in this section throughout this book. In truth, a great deal remains to be learned regarding exactly how language processing takes place. The information processing system present in this section leaves as many questions unanswered as it answers. Um, Psycholinguistics is the study of language processing mechanism. Psycholinguistics like to study how word meaning, sentence meaning, and discourse meaning are computed and represented in the mind. Next slide. This concept provides a framework for understanding how language processing occurs, although it is generally agreed that we encode, store, and retrieve linguistic information along the general lines sketched here. The specific process have yet to be addressed. Next slide, please. Central issues in language processing. After discuss each of these processes individually, we will apply them to an extended example of language processing. Next slide. Serial and parallel processing. If a group of processes take place once at a time, this is called serial processing. If two or more of the process take place simultaneously, it is called parallel processing. Serial models have been influential in the study of language and cognition over the past century. In part because many of the models were based on the electronic computer, which tend to execute process rapidly in a serial manner. Suppose we wish to develop a model of language production. The serial model will assume that this stage occur at a time with non-overlapping. If, on the other hand, we assume a parallel model, all of this process could take place at the same time. Next slide. Serial processing. Serial processing allows only one object at a time to be processed, whereas parallel processing assumes that various objects are processed simultaneously. The same model can explain both serial and parallel processing by adopting different parameter returns. For example, when reading this sentence, you can process all the words in one glance. Instead, you read them in sequence from left to the right. Next slide. Parallel processing is ability of the brain to do many things or process at once. For example, when a person sees an object, they don't see just one thing, but rather many different aspects that together help the person identify the object as whole. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide will be presented by Mia.
Suara saya kedengaran? Okay, thank you. The next slide will be explained by me. Top-down and bottom-up processes. Top-down processes is a theory that states that the process of recognizing an object that we observe is preceded by a hypothesis regarding the identity of a pattern. The object being observed, which is followed by the recognition of parts of the pattern based on assumptions that have been made previously. And bottom-up processing is a theory that proposes the idea that the process of recognizing an object begins with our identification of the specific parts of an object that we observe, which becomes the basis of the recognition of the object as a whole. Jadi dalam top-down processing ini itu semacam mengidentifikasi bagian-bagian spesifik dari suatu objek yang kita amati. Sedangkan bottom-up processing ini diawali dengan suatu hipotesis mengenai identifikasi suatu pola atau objek yang kita amati. Next slide, please. Okay, for example, like the thing above, we can know our father only by glancing at his limbs without seeing the whole. Well, why can't we recognize our father directly by just glancing at his limbs? Because we carry out the identification process to specific parts of the object we observe, our father. Jadi, kita dapat mengetahui ayah kita hanya dengan melihat sekilas anggota tubuhnya tanpa melihat keseluruhan. Nah, mengapa kita dapat mengenali ayah kita secara langsung hanya dengan melihat sekilas anggota tubuhnya? Karena kita melakukan proses identifikasi terhadap bagian-bagian spesifik terhadap objek yang kita amati, yaitu ayah kita. Next slide, please. Okay, automatic and controlled processes. Automatic processing doesn't require us to pay attention. Nor do we have to deliberately put in effort to control automatic processes. Automatic processing occurs without us giving much thought to it, and controlled processing is intentionally done while we are consciously aware to what we are doing. Next slide, please. For example of automatic processing. For example, singing a song you are familiar with. Automatically, if we hear a song that we know in a cafe or in the radio, you will automatically sing along. Jadi, dalam automatic and control process ini, di automatic ini adalah sesuatu yang otomatis atau secara spontan. Pada contohnya ini kayak misalkan kalian dengar sebuah lagu, dalam lagu yang udah familiar banget di kalian, yang kalian udah hafal lah. Terus kalian dengar di sebuah kafe atau radio, secara otomatis kalian pasti akan ikut bernyanyi. Begitu. Next slide, please. And then this is the example of controlled processing. When we first learned how to ride the bike, we had to pay attention to what we were doing. We had to be consciously aware of where the brakes were, where the pedals are located, how to stop, how to steer the bike, and etc. We purposefully paid attention to all of these things, and we put forth the effort to learn how to ride a bike. Berbeda dengan automatic processing ini, kalau control processing ini itu kita bisa mengontrol apa yang akan kita lakukan, kayak semacam ketika kita belajar naik sepeda, kita pasti tahu gimana caranya biar kita nggak jatuh, kita tahu di mana letak pedal, kita tahu di mana letak rem, seperti itu. Okay, the next slide will be explained by my friend. Thank you.
Okay, it's my turn. Next slide, please. So, modularity is that linguistic subsystems such as semantics and syntax operate independently rather than interactively. And if we look from further, the modularity position is that the language processing system is unique of cognitive abilities that cannot be reduced to general principle of cognition. So, modularity means the word that has more than one meaning. Yeah, for example, like when we say can, itu bisa jadi can bisa sama can kaleng. And then next slide, please. Yep. So actually, this easy material because it is like pragmasemantic that we learned before. So I have example here. I was afraid of Ali's powerful punch, especially since it had already laid out many towermen who had drank. They could handle that much alcohol. So, jadi di sini tuh kata kuncinya punch. Punch di sini tuh mempunyai dua arti. Pertama, Ali itu mempunyai pukulan hebat atau pukulan keras. Dan kedua itu the beverage of alcohol. Jadi apa ya, seperti kadar alkohol yang sangat tinggi sehingga mengakibatkan mabuk. And then I have another example. Life is hard, especially many people scramble to get the money. Life is hard, of course. Hard di sini itu mengartikan hidup itu susah. Ya, kita nggak bisa, kita tuh nggak bisa hidup dengan mudah. Kita harus ya mencari sesuatu dan sebagainya. Dan untuk arti yang kedua tuh, especially many people scramble to get the money. Mencari uang itu susah. Jadi hard di sini tuh mempunyai dua makna. Pertama itu life is hard, yang kedua itu people scramble to get the money. Jadi orang itu susah mencari uang. So I hope you understand it. Thank you very much. And the next slide will be delivered by DITA. Thank you very much.
Okay, development of processing system. The first, development of working memory, and the second, development of long-term memory. Next. Development of working memory. DHECARLO and friends study the development of three hypothesis component of the PDLA working memory model discussed early in this chapter: the central executive, the phonological loop, and the visospatial scapula. In here, Bedley and friend review a number of studies that examine the relationship between working memory and the vocabulary development. Jadi di sini Bedley meninjau sejumlah studi yang meneliti hubungan antara working memory dan pengembangan vocabulary memory. Bedley and friend menemukan bahwa tugas tersebut sangat kolerasi dengan perkembangan kosakata selama bertahun-tahun sebelum anak-anak sekolah. Jadi anak-anak dengan skor working memory lebih tinggi biasanya memiliki kosakata vocabulary yang lebih banyak. It could be that increase in the working memory led to increase in vocabulary, but a principle, the reference is also possible. Next, Os. Development of long-term memory. Piaget claimed that children's thinking processes are qualitatively different from those of adults. Adults don't merely think faster or more accurately than children, but in the different way. Piaget referred to the concept that we use to organize our experience as schemata. Next, Os. For the example, object performance, and then pretend play or fantasy play, and difference imitation. Jadi contoh dari object performance, ketika bayi berusia di bawah 4 bulan, biasanya dia tertarik pada suatu benda, dan benda tersebut disembunyikan oleh orang dewasa, maka bayi tersebut biasanya mengalami yang namanya protes. Tetapi mereka hanya mengingat benda itu secara sesaat, kemudian lupa kembali dengan benda tersebut. Tetapi jika benda tersebut ditunjukkan kembali di hadapan mereka, maka mereka akan merasa senang. Nah, dengan demikian, bayi tetap tertarik pada benda tersebut, tetapi tidak mencari benda tersebut, karena bayi, menurut Piaget, tidak mengetahui bahwa benda tersebut masih ada. Nah, di sini, pada objek ini mengacu pada pemahaman anak-anak bahwa objek terus ada bahkan ketika objek tersebut tidak dapat dirasakan. Nah, contoh dari pretend play atau fantasy play, ketika bayi berusia 12 bulan atau lebih, mereka akan menggunakan benda-benda dalam permainan yang mirip dengan orang dewasa gunakan. Contohnya, ketika mereka meletakkan sendok di mulut mereka, ini jadi contoh pemahaman bahwa ini merupakan permainan simbolik. Ini menunjukkan bahwa bayi dapat memahami bahwa suatu benda dapat mewakili benda lain. Kemudian dari deferred imitation, ini merupakan keterampilan kedua, adalah meniru yang ditunda. di mana anak menirukan perilaku yang terlihat dari beberapa waktu sebelumnya. Dari contoh-contoh ini mengacu pada pengembangan development long-term memory. Okay, I think enough for my presentation, and back to the moderator, Carlo.
I think it's enough for group 2. I hope you enjoy this presentation, and I see you again in the psycholinguistic class. Thank you.